Read it out loud, old hag. That was the first thing I heard at 3 a.m. My eyes flew open, heart hammering in my chest. Molly, my 9-year-old granddaughter, stood by my bed with a pink card in her trembling hands. Her little face was pale, like she knew what was written inside. I sat up, my fingers cold, and opened the envelope. The words sliced me open before I could take another breath. "You're nothing but trash. Leave before we throw you out." From the living room, I heard Eric's laugh, sharp and cruel. "Come on, read it louder. Let's hear the truth." I froze. My own daughter, Renee, must have told Molly to hand me this card. That child's wide eyes begged me not to hate her. My stomach twisted. In that moment, the air in the house turned poisonous. I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to my channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. My name is Irene. I am 72 years old. Tonight I am telling you how my own family tried to crush me when they thought I was too weak to fight back. But they were wrong. Molly whispered, "Grandma, I'm sorry." She ran off before I could speak. I heard Renee's voice from the hallway, dripping with mock sweetness. "Did she read it yet? Make sure she understands we mean it." Laughter followed, the kind that cuts deeper than any knife. I held the card, the ink smudging under my thumb, my breath shaking in my throat. I sat there in the dark, blinds half open, the streetlight outside pouring a cold glow across my blanket. My heart ached in a way I cannot describe. This was not just a prank, this was deliberate. My daughter and her husband had turned my granddaughter into their messenger of cruelty. For a moment I questioned myself. Was I overreacting? Maybe it was just a joke. But then I remembered Eric's voice, hard and taunting. "Leave before we throw you out." Those are not words of a joke. Those are words of eviction, of rejection, of betrayal. I placed the card on my nightstand and stared at it, my mind racing. If they wanted war, they had just declared it. I sat there with the card still burning in my mind, but my thoughts began drifting back to the years when everything had been different. It was impossible not to think about how much I had given to the very people who now treated me like an outsider. When Renee was a little girl, I promised myself she would never go without. Her father died when she was barely 3. I remember holding her close at night when she asked why he never came home, whispering that we would make it together. That promise shaped every choice I made. I worked long shifts, sometimes through the night, to make sure there was always food on the table. When Renee wanted to attend nursing school, the tuition bill was more than I could handle. Still, I sold the house her father and I had built together and scraped together $18,000. I told myself it was worth it to see her future secure. I never once hesitated, not even when it meant moving into a smaller place with peeling paint and drafty windows. Years later, when she announced she was marrying Eric, I reached into the savings account I had built, dollar by dollar. $15,000 disappeared in a single moment, so she could have the wedding she dreamed of. I still remember writing that check, feeling both proud and hollow at the same time. I did not regret it, but I knew it came from years of sacrifice. Then came the house. They wanted a place of their own, a fresh start. I gave them $30,000 for the down payment. I told them it was their chance to build something lasting. Watching them carry boxes into their new home, I convinced myself the money had gone to something meaningful. Every step of the way, I carried the weight so they would not have to. I gave my time, my health, and my savings. In return, I asked for nothing except a place at the table, a phone call now and then, and the warmth of being wanted. But somewhere along the line, things shifted. Gratitude faded into expectation. The calls grew shorter, the invitations fewer. My advice about the children was brushed aside as meddling. My presence became something to be managed, not welcomed. Sitting in that dark room after reading the card, the memories came back sharp and bitter. Every sacrifice I made felt like a brick in the wall they had built between us. I realized I had traded away pieces of myself for a bond that no longer existed. I thought about the night of Renee's graduation. She hugged me tight and whispered, "This wouldn't have been possible without you." Her eyes shone with sincerity. Now those same eyes looked at me with irritation when I asked simple questions. The gap between then and now felt like an abyss. I had carried her on my shoulders, and in return, she handed me a card telling me to leave. The irony was not lost on me. I lay back against the pillow, staring at the ceiling. The weight of my past choices pressed down on me. I had built their lives with my bare hands, and now they wanted to erase me from it. My heart ached, but beneath the ache, something else began to stir. The card was not just cruelty, it was clarity. The morning after that night, I tried to go about my day as if nothing had happened, but the cracks in our family had been showing long before the card arrived. Now, I could no longer ignore them. It started with the invitations that never came. I learned about birthdays and anniversaries through pictures posted online. Smiling faces gathered around cakes and tables, yet my chair sat empty because it had not been offered. When I asked Renee why she had not told me, her answer was always the same. "It was just a small thing, Mom. You would have been bored." I noticed how my presence in their house grew smaller. I was expected to help with the children, to cook and clean when they were too tired. But when it came time for family dinners or outings, I was often told to stay home and rest. My name slowly disappeared from conversations, as if I were no longer part of their story. One evening, I walked into the living room and stopped cold. A new family portrait hung on the wall, taken at some professional studio. Renee, Eric, and the children smiled together against a soft blue background. My face was nowhere in sight. I asked, quietly, why I had not been included. Renee shrugged. "It's just for us. You know, a picture of our little family." I smiled weakly, but the truth cut deep. I had spent years holding them together, and now I was reduced to someone on the outside looking in. There were other moments that made the distance impossible to deny. At dinner one night, I tried to remind Molly to finish her vegetables. Eric snapped before I could finish the sentence. "We're the parents here. Stay in your lane." The children looked down at their plates, confused. I swallowed my pride and stayed silent, though every word stung like salt on an open wound. Soon after, small criticisms became routine. Renee would say I forgot things too often, or that I tired the children out with my old-fashioned ways. Eric hinted that I confused their vitamins. None of it was true, but hearing it often enough made me wonder if they were right. I kept offering help anyway, hoping my consistency would remind them of who I had always been. I brought groceries when money was tight, stayed overnight when they both worked late, and cleaned the house before they came home. Gratitude was rare. More often I heard sighs, curt nods, or nothing at all. The signs had been there all along. I had simply refused to see them. That card in the middle of the night had only put into words what their actions had already been saying. I was not part of their circle anymore. I was a burden in their eyes, someone to be managed, not loved. Lying awake at night, I replayed every small slight, every ignored phone call, every time they made plans without me. The truth became harder to push away. I had given them everything, but they had already started to erase me. One evening, not long after the card, I sat at their kitchen table, trying to share a meal with them. The children were restless, Molly tapping her fork and the younger one fussing over his plate. I tried to keep my voice steady as I reminded them to settle down. Before I could finish, Eric slammed his glass down and looked straight at me. "Enough. You need to stop acting like you run this house. We're the parents. You're just making things harder." The room went silent. Renee kept her eyes on her plate, pretending not to notice the tension. My hands trembled under the table. I had raised her alone, carried her through years of hardship, yet she could not even defend me in that moment. I excused myself quietly and began clearing dishes, but Eric's voice followed me. "You don't have the energy anymore. The kids need stability, not confusion." His words were deliberate, each one meant to shrink me smaller. I looked at Molly, her face twisted in worry. She whispered, "Grandma, why are you crying?" I forced a smile that did not reach my eyes. "I'm fine, sweetheart." Before she could say more, Renee pulled her close. "Go wash your hands. Grandma's just tired." Later that night in the living room, I tried to speak with Renee. "Why do you let him talk to me like that? After all I've done, do I really deserve this?" She shifted uncomfortably on the couch. "Mom, you're too sensitive. Eric doesn't mean anything by it. You just take things the wrong way." Her words hit harder than Eric's insults. Gaslighting at its sharpest. I began to wonder if maybe I was imagining the cruelty, if maybe I had lost my grip. My mind turned circles, replaying his tone, her silence, the way the children looked at me with confusion. The next morning, Eric made his position clear. As I poured myself a cup of coffee, he leaned against the counter. "This arrangement isn't working. You need to think about moving into a home, a nice place where people can watch over you." "You're not young anymore, Irene." His voice was calm but sharp, the kind of calm that brooks no argument. I wanted to scream, but instead I just set the mug down. "I'm not helpless. I don't need strangers looking after me," he smirked. "You'll see. It's for the best." That sentence played in my head all day. For the best. Whose best? Certainly not mine. That night I lay awake, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of the house settling. Every sound felt heavy, pressing down on me. The card had been cruel, but these words were worse. They were the final confirmation of what I had begun to suspect. I was no longer seen as family. I was a problem to be managed, an obstacle to their comfort. The tears came slowly, hot and steady, until I could not cry anymore. The humiliation of being pushed aside in my own daughter's home burned into me. I realized there would be no going back. The life I thought I had with them was already gone. A few days later, I stepped outside just to breathe. The walls of that house had begun to feel like a trap. Every word and every glance, another reminder that I was no longer welcome. As I walked down the block, I saw Tom, my neighbor for more than 20 years. He was sitting on his porch, rocking slowly in his chair. He looked at me and frowned. "You look worn out, Irene. What's going on in there?" I hesitated, but the dam inside me had already cracked. I told him about the card, about Eric's words at the dinner table, about Renee's silence. I did not cry, but my voice shook. Tom listened without interrupting, his lined face growing darker with every detail. Finally, he leaned forward, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. "They're using you. Plain and simple. You give and they take, and now they want to throw you away. You can't let them." Hearing someone else say it out loud cut through the fog I had been living in. For weeks I had doubted myself, wondering if I had misunderstood, if maybe I had been too sensitive. But Tom's words confirmed what I already knew. I looked down at my hands, the veins raised, the skin thin. "I don't know if I have the strength anymore." He shook his head firmly. "Strength isn't about lifting things, Irene. It's about standing your ground. They want you to question yourself, but you know the truth. You're not crazy. You're not useless. You're their scapegoat because it's easy." I carried those words with me back into the house. Inside, the atmosphere was unchanged. Renee barely looked up from her phone when I walked in. Eric was stretched out on the couch, the television blaring. Neither of them asked where I had been. That evening, I tried once more to bridge the gap. I sat across from Renee at the kitchen table and said quietly, "Why do you let him treat me this way? Do you really believe I am a burden?" She sighed heavily, as if the question bored her. "Mom, you read too much into things. Eric's just practical. You get upset so easily. It's not good for the kids." There it was again. The twist of my words, the suggestion that I was unstable. Gaslighting so subtle it almost made me doubt my own memory. But Tom's voice echoed in my head. "You're not crazy, you know the truth." I stayed quiet after that, but my silence was not surrender. It was the beginning of something else. Later that night, Molly tiptoed into my room. She climbed onto the bed and whispered, "Grandma, I don't like it when they talk to you that way." Her small arms wrapped around me. For a moment I felt the warmth I had been missing. I stroked her hair and whispered back, "Thank you, sweetheart." When she left, I stared at the ceiling, my chest tight. The contrast was sharp. A child could see the cruelty, yet the adults pretended it did not exist. That was the moment I understood I could not wait for them to change. If I wanted respect, if I wanted dignity, I would have to claim it myself. One night, as I was passing the hallway, I heard Eric's voice coming from the back patio. He was speaking low, but the words carried through the screen door. I froze and leaned closer. "She's getting too comfortable here," he said. "We need her out. Once she signs, the condo in Florida is ours to deal with. Renee, you know it's the only way. She won't last long on her own anyway." My chest tightened. I waited for my daughter to defend me, to push back against the cruelty. Instead, I heard her sigh. "I know, but you have to be careful. If she suspects anything, she'll fight us. Let her think it's for her health. Make it sound like we're concerned." Eric chuckled. "Concerned, right? She's lucky we've put up with her this long." The words struck like blows. For months I had doubted myself, wondering if I was imagining the distance. Now I had proof. It wasn't just thoughtless words or careless neglect. It was a plan. They wanted me gone, and they were willing to manipulate me into giving up everything. I backed away quietly, my legs shaking. In my room, I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching the blanket in my fists. The fear was sharp, but underneath it, a spark of anger began to burn. I had lived with humiliation, but hearing their voices plot against me changed everything. The next morning, Renee acted as if nothing had happened. She poured coffee, humming lightly, avoiding my eyes. Eric came in later, cheerful, almost too cheerful. "Morning, Irene. How did you sleep?" His tone was sweet but carried an edge. I watched them carefully, replaying every word I had overheard. I forced a smile. I slept fine. They exchanged a quick glance, thinking I was still in the dark. That glance told me more than any words could. They believed I was weak, confused, and easy to push. As the day went on, I noticed their tactics more clearly. Renee kept telling me I seemed tired, suggesting I might need a checkup. Eric reminded me that managing bills was stressful at my age. They were setting the stage, planting doubts. That evening, Eric sat across from me at the table. "You should really think about moving into assisted living. You'd have friends there, people your own age. We'd visit all the time. Doesn't that sound better than rattling around this house?" I looked at him steadily. "This is my home. I'm not going anywhere." He leaned back, smirk tugging at his mouth. "We'll see." I excused myself and went to my room, but my mind was racing. Their plan was real, and it was already unfolding around me. For the first time, I stopped questioning my memory. I knew the truth, and knowing the truth meant I had to be ready. From the moment I overheard their plan, the pressure inside the house grew heavier each day. Eric no longer bothered to hide his contempt. He began locking cabinets, moving papers out of sight, and speaking to me like I was a child. One morning, he caught me making breakfast for the children. "Stop before you hurt yourself," he snapped, grabbing the spatula out of my hand. "You get confused too easily. We can't risk you burning the kitchen down." The children stared, wide-eyed. I swallowed my anger, not wanting to make a scene in front of them, but inside, my blood boiled. Renee followed his lead, though she cloaked it in softer words. "Mom, you look exhausted. Maybe it's time to rest more. Let us handle things." She smiled, as if she were caring for me, but I could hear the coldness underneath. Every word was another brick in the story they were building, the story that I was weak, unstable, and unable to manage on my own. They began limiting my time with Molly. When I tried to help her with homework, Eric interrupted. "She needs structure, not confusion. Go lie down, Irene." Molly's eyes filled with guilt, but she obeyed her father. That cut deeper than any insult. It did not stop there. They whispered in corners, their voices dropping whenever I entered the room. Bills that I used to pay were suddenly off limits. Renee told me, "Don't worry about it, Mom. You've done enough. Let us handle the important stuff." The implication was clear. I was no longer capable of even small responsibilities. One evening, I found Eric rifling through my desk drawer. "What are you doing?" I demanded. He slammed it shut and sneered. "Making sure you don't misplace things again. Someone has to keep this house in order." The gaslighting grew relentless. Every small mistake, every lapse in memory was thrown back at me. If I misplaced my keys, Eric announced loudly that I was losing touch with reality. If I hesitated while recalling a date, Renee would sigh and shake her head, as though I were already fading away. I began to feel trapped in my own mind. At night, I questioned myself. Was I slipping? Were they right? The doubt crept in, cold and heavy, until I could hardly recognize my own thoughts. But the ember of anger remained. I held on to Tom's words, reminding myself that I was not crazy, that I knew what I had heard. Their constant attempts to rewrite reality only confirmed the truth. They wanted me to surrender, to sign away my independence, and vanish quietly. The more they pushed, the clearer my path became. I could not confront them head-on yet, not without proof, but I knew I would not let them win. Their cruelty had crossed the line from disrespect to calculated destruction. That night I lay awake, staring at the shadows on the ceiling, my heart steady with a new resolve. They thought I was weak, but they had no idea what I was preparing. I began moving carefully, knowing that every step had to be planned. They believed I was fading, that my mind was too weak to hold on to details. That was their mistake. My mind was sharper than ever, sharpened by years of survival. The first thing I did was find a way to protect myself. I bought a small recorder, one that could fit inside my pocket. Whenever Eric spoke down to me, whenever Renee twisted my words, I pressed the button. Their voices filled the device, each cruel remark captured exactly as it was said. I listened back late at night in my room, the confirmation keeping me steady. It was not my imagination. They were building a case against me, but I was building one against them. Next, I went through my papers, the ones Eric had tried to move. I organized everything into neat folders: the deed to my small house, the records of my savings, the accounts they did not know about. I even made copies, storing them in a place they would never check. If they thought they could erase my name from my own life, they would soon learn otherwise. I practiced staying quiet around them, nodding when they spoke, letting them think their gaslighting was working. The calmer I appeared, the less they suspected. Inside, however, every insult and every smirk only fueled my determination. One afternoon, Renee cornered me in the kitchen. "Mom, you really should consider what Eric said. Assisted living would be easier on everyone. You'd be comfortable, and we wouldn't have to worry." I looked at her with a blank expression and asked softly, "Do you really believe I can't handle myself?" She smiled in that practiced way, the one that never reached her eyes. "It's not about belief, it's about reality." I said nothing more, but that moment was burned into my mind. I replayed her voice later on my recorder, the smooth cruelty dripping from every word. At night, I sat at my desk, reviewing my notes and recordings. I kept a small journal, writing down every slight, every attempt to twist my memory. Dates, times, exact phrases. I knew one day soon I would need to put it all in front of them. Still, there were moments of doubt. Sometimes I stared at the shadows in my room, wondering if I was preparing for a battle I could not win. But then I would hear Eric's voice again, telling Renee the condo would be theirs, or see the look in her eyes when she dismissed me like a stranger. The doubt vanished. They had pushed me into a corner, but they had also awakened something inside me. I was no longer the mother who quietly sacrificed. I was someone ready to fight back. I closed my journal one night and whispered to myself, "Not yet, but soon." The night of the family dinner arrived, a gathering Eric insisted on hosting. Relatives filled the living room, voices overlapping, glasses clinking. I knew why he had arranged it. This was the stage where they would try to corner me. I sat quietly, hands folded in my lap, while the children ran around and laughter filled the air. When the plates were cleared, Eric stood up. His tone was light, but his eyes never left me. "We've been talking about what's best for Mom," he said to the room. "She's been struggling, and it's time to make a decision." He laid a folder on the table. "We found a wonderful place that can care for her. All she needs to do is sign these papers." I felt the eyes of the family on me, a mix of pity and discomfort. My chest tightened, but I kept my face calm. Renee smiled thinly. "Mom, please, don't make this harder than it has to be. Everyone here just wants what's best for you." I picked up the folder, flipping through the pages slowly. My hand trembled, but not from weakness. Eric leaned closer, whispering so only I could hear. "Do the right thing. Sign it before you embarrass yourself." I looked up at him, then at the others. My voice was steady. "You want me to sign away my life, but before I do, let's all listen to something." I reached into my pocket and placed the recorder on the table. A single click, and the room filled with Eric's voice. "She's getting too comfortable here. We need her out. Once she signs, the condo in Florida is ours to deal with." Gasps rippled through the room, chairs shifted, eyes widened. Renee's face drained of color. Eric's smirk disappeared as the weight of his own words hung in the air. I pressed play again. "She won't last long on her own anyway," his voice sneered. The silence that followed was heavy. I leaned back, meeting their stunned faces. "This is the truth. This is the concern you spoke of." Eric lunged for the recorder, his voice sharp. "You sneaky old woman. You think this will change anything?" I pulled it back before he could grab it. "The copies are safe. Take one more step, and everyone in this town will hear exactly who you are." Renee tried to recover, her voice trembling. "Mom, you misunderstood. That was just Eric venting. You're confused. You always twist things." I cut her off. "No, I am not confused. You laughed at me, humiliated me, and now you plot behind my back. You wanted me to doubt myself, But I know exactly what I heard. The relatives shifted uncomfortably. Some whispered. The damage was done. The mask had been ripped away. I stood, my legs steady. I will not be signing anything. And from this day forward, I am no longer your burden. I am your reckoning. Eric's face turned red as whispers circled the table. He slammed his hand down hard enough to rattle the glasses. Enough of this circus. Give me that recorder right now. I held it firmly against my chest. You're not touching it. And even if you did, I have copies stored where you'll never find them. Renee stood up quickly, trying to smooth things over. Everyone calm down. This is just a misunderstanding. Mom doesn't always remember things correctly. Her voice cracked as she said it, and I could see the fear in her eyes. She knew the recording had destroyed the story they had been building. I rose to my feet, steady despite the pounding in my chest. Misunderstanding? That was your voice, Eric. That was your plan. You laughed about throwing me out. You counted on me doubting myself, but you underestimated me. The relatives avoided eye contact, shifting uncomfortably. One aunt cleared her throat and muttered, "This doesn't sound like concern. It sounds like greed." Eric lunged forward again, but two of his cousins stepped in between us. "Leave her alone," one of them said sharply. Eric's jaw tightened, his rage barely contained. I looked at Renee, my own daughter, standing there with her hands clenched at her sides. "You had the chance to stop this. You chose to stay silent. That silence speaks louder than anything else tonight." Her lips trembled. "Mom, please, let's not do this in front of everyone." I shook my head. "No, Renee. We are doing this now. I have been humiliated in my own home. Tonight the truth is out." Eric tried one last tactic, his voice dropping low. "You're ruining your family, Irene. Do you want everyone to see you as the bitter old woman who couldn't let go?" I lifted my chin. "No. I want them to see me as the woman who finally stood up." The room fell into silence again. Every eye was on us, but this time I felt no shame. I felt free. I placed the recorder back in my pocket and pushed the folder of papers across the table toward Eric. "You will never get me to sign. Not now, not ever. And if you try again, I'll make sure the whole town hears every word you spoke." He glared at me, his fists tightening, but he said nothing. The balance had shifted. He knew it, and I knew it. Without waiting for another word, I walked away from the table, each step heavier than the last but filled with certainty. For the first time in years, I was not the one shrinking back. They were. That night, I lay in bed with the recorder beside me. My heart still raced, but it was not from fear. It was from the clarity that came when the mask of manipulation had been ripped away. I had taken the first step. There would be more to come, but the silence they had forced on me was broken forever. The days after that dinner were quiet, but not in a peaceful way. The air in the house was heavy, every word clipped, every glance filled with tension. Eric avoided me most of the time, but I could feel his anger simmering. Renee moved carefully around me, as if afraid I might speak the truth again. I knew silence would not protect me. The recording had shifted the balance, but it was not enough. If I wanted freedom, if I wanted dignity, I had to make sure they could never twist the story back in their favor. I took the copies of the recording and went to the bank. The clerk watched me carefully as I placed the flash drive and a written statement into a safety deposit box. It was simple, secure, and beyond Eric's reach. As I walked out of the bank, I felt lighter. For the first time in months, I had control of something they could not take away. That evening I gathered a few trusted people. I visited Tom and let him hear the recording. His eyes darkened as the words played. "You need to share this with more than just me," he said. "They can't hide from the truth if others know it." I nodded. I had already decided to send copies to the church committee, where Renee volunteered, and to the community board where Eric often boasted about his contributions. Their reputations were built on the image of being generous, reliable, trustworthy. The recording stripped that away. Within days, the whispers began. People looked at them differently at gatherings. Conversations paused when they entered the room. Renee tried to carry on as if nothing had changed, but her smile was brittle. Eric grew restless, snapping at anyone who questioned him. At home, the hostility turned sharper. One night he confronted me in the kitchen. "You think you've won? You think anyone cares about your little game? You're making yourself look pathetic." I met his glare without flinching. "The only pathetic thing here is your greed. You thought you could erase me, Now everyone knows the truth. He clenched his jaw, fists tightening, but he didn't dare move closer. The fear in his eyes was new, and it told me everything. He knew he had lost control. Renee tried once more to soften the damage. She sat on the edge of my bed late one night. "Mom, can't we put this behind us? We're family. Let's forget what was said." I looked at her, my heart heavy. "You stood by while he tried to destroy me. You handed him the silence he needed. That is something I cannot forget." Her eyes welled with tears, but I did not waver. I had spent too many years giving in, excusing cruelty, hoping for gratitude that never came. This time was different. By the end of the week, Eric and Renee were no longer the admired couple they once pretended to be. Their names carried the weight of suspicion. Their friends pulled back. Their carefully built image was cracking. And for the first time in a long time, I felt steady. Not because I had hurt them, but because I had reclaimed myself. The final break came quietly. After weeks of tension, Renee came to my room one morning, her face pale and tired. She sat down without asking, her hands twisting in her lap. "Mom," she whispered, "I never wanted it to go this far. I thought if I stayed quiet, things would settle. But I see now I let him do too much." Her voice cracked, and for the first time I saw the daughter I had raised, not the woman who had let silence betray me. I felt the familiar ache of love and disappointment mixing together. "Renee, you hurt me more by saying nothing than if you had spoken against me. But you're still my daughter. I can forgive, but I won't forget." She nodded slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks. Eric kept his distance after that. The man who once filled every room with his arrogance now avoided my eyes. His reputation was in pieces, his allies gone. One evening he muttered to me, "You ruined me." I answered softly, "No, you ruined yourself. All I did was show the truth." Those words ended the war between us. He never apologized, but he no longer tried to push me out. Sometimes defeat is the only apology a person can give. I decided then it was time to leave their house on my own terms. I moved into a small apartment near the park, modest but mine alone. Molly visited often, her laughter filling the rooms with warmth. Tom stopped by with groceries, reminding me I was not alone. For the first time in years, I woke each morning without dread. The battles had left scars, but they had also left clarity. I had survived the humiliation, the gaslighting, the schemes. I had reclaimed my place in the world by refusing to let lies define me. Justice had come not through revenge, but through truth. Forgiveness followed, not to erase the past, but to free me from it. I carried both like a banner, proof that dignity could be restored even after betrayal. If you've stayed with me until the end, thank you. Stories like this are not just about pain, but about strength and healing. If you've ever faced betrayal or been made to doubt yourself, I hope my story reminds you that the truth always finds its way through. Please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and tell me in the comments if you've ever had to stand up for your own dignity. I'd love to hear your story. Bạn có muốn tôi viết lại đoạn này trực tiếp hòa vào cuối chương 12 như một lời tâm sự tự nhiên, thay vì tách riêng, để khán giả thấy sự liền mạch hơn không?